Hello, and welcome to this episode of The Diary of a Lawyer. And today I want to briefly talk about the New York City Homeless List Bill of Rights that has come into law. The Mayor Eric Adams allowed a homeless Bill of Rights to become law over the last weekend, a step which supporters say will strengthen legal protection for the unhoused in a city struggling with a record number of people in its shelter system. The measure passed the city council with a bipartisan support in April, as shelters were swelled beyond capacity by the arrival of 70,000 international migrants since last spring. Now, among other things, the new law acknowledges the explicit right to sleep outdoors in public spaces, though not any place they like. New York City has other laws in place that could limit where outside the unhoused can sleep. Police can clear sidewalks and streets of anyone who impedes the flow of traffic. Most city parks close at 1 a.m. and people can generally sleep on a privately owned property. The law also gives people the right to complain about shelter accommodations without repercussion and includes safeguards to prevent a person being assigned to spaces that don't correspond to their gender identity. It also gives people the right to apply for rental assistance and requires parents staying in shelters be given diapers for their babies. The main sponsor of the Homeless Bill of Rights, New York City's elected public advocate, Jumaane Williams, said the measure was necessary to let people in the shelter system know they're entitled to fair and respectful treatment. Now, the new law also reiterates that New Yorkers have a right to shelter, a mandate in place since 1981 when a court ordered the city to provide temporary housing to anyone who asks for it. Now, meeting that obligation has been an enormous struggle for New York City as the shelter system is being overtaxed by migrants who streamed across the U.S. southern border over the past year. The city's Department of Homeless Services is currently sheltering some 81,000 people, not including the thousands more housed by other agencies, such as those escaping domestic violence. Now, to make more room, the city has rented out entire hotels and found temporary accommodation in nearby counties. Adams, the mayor, who is a Democrat, also recently asked a judge to temporarily relieve the city of a decades-old court-imposed legal obligation to provide shelter for anyone who needs it. The mayor said the city wasn't seeking to end New York's unique right to shelter, only suspension of the obligation to provide housing during times when its shelter system is overwhelmed. Now, that proposed relaxation of the shelter rules drew protests from advocates for homeless people, including Williams, who said it could lead to more people sleeping outside. In meeting this moment and its very real urgency and scope, we should not be focusing on efforts on removing the rights of the most marginalized, said Williams in a statement last week. Now, advocates for the homeless have been critical of the mayor's approach to homelessness, which has periodically included sweeps of outdoor encampments and subway spaces. And that sort of is, in a nutshell, around the homeless law that became law several days ago. Now, it's important to note that homelessness in New York City has hit levels that haven't been since the Great Depression. The advocacy group, the Coalition for the Homeless, says that as of March, there are more than 75 people sleeping in city shelters each night, which includes thousands of children. And recent migrants to the U.S. are also among those without stable housing. And so the homeless bill that is now infecting the city explicitly acknowledges the right to sleep outdoors with some limitations and the right to apply for rental aid, but also gives the right to complain about shelter conditions. And so Mayor Adams allowed this bill into good law. He didn't veto it, but he was also challenging the New York City's right to shelter law, which requires the city to provide shelter to anyone who requests it. And this is coming in light of the influx of people who are unhoused, asylum seekers who are in New York. Now, I think the question is that the discussions had was, is this a contradiction? Now, according to Williams, she says the number of decisions that the mayor is making that I think, according to Williams, are not helpful for the asylum seekers or for New Yorkers who have been homeless. Williams goes on to say that they need to remind folks that the day before the first asylum seeker bus came to New York City, there were around over 50,000 New Yorkers already in the shelter, and a lot of them working, a lot of them children, a lot of them families. And they had dealt with the situation then, but which was not as acute as now. She goes on to say that she always says that the mayor is correct, but they're not getting the assistance and help they need from the federal government at all. And they believe that the mayor is wrong in some of the things that they're doing. And the challenging the right to shelter is one of the things that they vehemently disagree. The question then is put is, well, how do you change the fear that some New Yorkers have, which is they have somebody sleeping outside, and instead of feeling sympathy, they feel fear for themselves and their safety? How does one change that? And what do people say about such people in this Bill of Rights? Now, Williams, who is the public advocate, explains that they have leaders at the moment that are doing the tried and true method of stoking fear to elevate themselves in power, which she says has dangerous consequences, and that across the country people are using fear and uncomfortability, which resonates, of course, with the situation in New York. And so she says they want to see leaders changing the rhetoric and having discussion, and they're hoping that the Bill of Rights can do is be part of that change, so people can recognize the humanity in Jordan Neely and can recognize the humanity in people who are unhoused and who are homeless. Jordan Neely, rest in peace, is the young man, the artist who lost his life on the subway in a chokehold, and the killer has since been charged, and that's a different case. And so that is it in a nutshell regarding the New York homeless bill that became law. And we shall, as always, watch developments. And thanks for listening. We'll speak again. Thank you. Bye.